Thinkasium Lab, where thoughts prosper.
The life and contributions of history's greatest human nature thinker, Aristotle.
Welcome to Thinkasium Lab, Ep.18. This video discusses about Aristotle, the royal doctor's son who became history's greatest mind on human behavior. How did this ancient Greek figure out so much about why we act the way we do? He got plenty wrong. Women have fewer teeth than men? Really? But his work on ethics, psychology, and perception created the foundation for how we understand ourselves today. So let's explore.
Long before Wikipedia or that one friend who corrects everyone at parties, there was Aristotle, ancient Greece's ultimate polymath, who had opinions on literally everything from the movement of stars to why your cat acts the way it does. Born in 384 BCE in Stagira, a small town in northern Greece, Aristotle would become one of history's most influential thinkers, despite some truly bizarre ideas. His greatest contribution was creating the first comprehensive framework for understanding human behavior, ethics, and psychology, essentially inventing the systematic study of human nature. When medieval scholars simply referred to the philosopher, everyone knew exactly who they meant. Family background, doctor's son, philosopher's mind. Aristotle lucked out in the family lottery. His father Nicomachus served as the personal physician to King Amyntas of Macedonia. This royal connection was basically ancient Greece's version of being born with a silver scroll in your mouth. Growing up around medicine likely sparked Aristotle's lifelong obsession with classification and observation, though he ultimately chose to dissect ideas rather than bodies. Well, mostly, more on that later. When Aristotle was just a teenager, both his parents died, leaving him in the care of a guardian named Proxenus. Talk about formative experiences. Nothing says I'll create a comprehensive theory of ethics and human flourishing quite like childhood tragedy. Education from student to rival. At 17, Aristotle packed his sandals and headed to Athens to study at Plato's Academy, the Harvard of ancient Greece. For 20 years, he absorbed Plato's teachings, becoming the star pupil, while simultaneously developing ideas that would eventually make his teacher roll over in his tomb. When Plato died in 347 BCE, Aristotle was passed over for leadership of the Academy. Imagine spending 2 decades at a company only to be snubbed for the promotion. Instead of creating a passive-aggressive parchment about it, Aristotle left Athens and eventually became tutor to a temperamental teenager named Alexander, later upgraded to Alexander the Great. Teacher to a conqueror. Picture being responsible for educating the future ruler of the known world. No pressure. While Alexander went on to conquer vast territories, it's unclear how much of Aristotle's teaching on moderation and ethics actually stuck. Student evaluation forms weren't a thing back then, but if they were, Aristotle might have written, "Shows promise, but tendency toward megalomania and declaring himself divine may be problematic." The Lyceum, Aristotle's walkabout. After his tutoring gig ended, Aristotle returned to Athens and founded his own school called the Lyceum. Unlike modern classrooms with their sit down and be quiet approach, Aristotle taught while walking around. His students were literally followers. These walking discussions gave his school the nickname peripatetic, from the Greek word for to walk around. It was philosophy's first ever walking meeting, millennia before Silicon Valley executives claimed to have invented the concept. Family man and complicated bachelor. Aristotle married Pythias, the niece of his friend Hermias. After her death, he formed a relationship with Herpyllis, who bore him a son named Nicomachus, named after his father. His famous work on ethics, Nicomachean Ethics, was likely dedicated to this son. For a man who wrote extensively about friendship, family, and human relationships, Aristotle's personal life shows he practiced what he philosophized, maintaining close connections despite a busy schedule of revolutionizing every field of human knowledge. What even the greatest human observer got wrong. For all his profound insights into human nature, Aristotle had some ideas that were hilariously off base. He believed women had fewer teeth than men. Apparently, it never occurred to him to just ask his wife to open her mouth for a quick count. He thought the brain's main purpose was to cool the blood, essentially describing it as the body's radiator rather than its command center. He was convinced that eels spontaneously generated from mud rather than reproducing like normal creatures. He believed heavy objects fall faster than lighter ones, a misconception that persisted until Galileo came along nearly 2,000 years later. These blunders remind us that even the greatest minds have blind spots, especially when they're too convinced of their own logic to check their work. Aristotle's legacy, the original influencer. Aristotle's intellectual descendants are basically everyone who's thought critically since his death. His immediate successor at the Lyceum was Theophrastus, who continued his botanical work and wrote The Characters, an amusing catalog of personality types you'd probably still recognize at your office today. Aristotle's works became foundational in medieval Islamic and Christian philosophy, with thinkers like Avicenna, Averroes, and Thomas Aquinas building entire worldviews on his framework. Even when Renaissance and Enlightenment thinkers rebelled against Aristotelian ideas, they were still defining themselves in opposition to his enormous influence. The end. Politics can be deadly. When Alexander the Great died in 323 BCE, Athens experienced an anti-Macedonian backlash. Aristotle, with his connections to the Macedonian court, faced charges of impiety, the ancient equivalent of being cancelled. Rather than stand trial, he fled to Chalcis, allegedly remarking that he wouldn't allow Athens to sin twice against philosophy, referring to the execution of Socrates decades earlier. Aristotle died the following year at age 62, reportedly from stomach issues. Some ancient rumors suggested he might have been poisoned, but most historians attribute his death to natural causes. Unlike his dramatic ideas about tragedy requiring a reversal of fortune, Aristotle's own end was relatively undramatic. The philosopher simply exited the stage. The first true scientist of human behavior. What made Aristotle history's greatest human nature thinker was his revolutionary framework combining psychology, ethics, and biology. His Nicomachean Ethics introduced the world to the concept that happiness comes from living virtuously according to our nature. His De Anima, on the soul, created the first systematic theory of perception and cognition, explaining how humans understand the world through their senses. His theory of the four causes let him analyze human actions by looking at their purpose, form, agent, and materials, basically creating the blueprint for all future research on why people do what they do. When most thinkers explained human behavior through gods and spirits, Aristotle took a revolutionary approach. He saw humans as part of the natural world, complex beings whose perceptions, values, behaviors, and actions followed patterns that could be studied, understood, and improved upon. For all his mistakes, and there were many, Aristotle's fundamental insight remains powerful. To understand the universe, we must first understand ourselves, teeth-counting errors and all.
Thank you for watching this episode and joining us on the journey of exploring beliefs, values, worldviews, and culture. Don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel. See you in the next episode.